Hi, everybody. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about anxiety. Most of you are maybe already familiar with anxiety and what it is. So we're briefly just going to review what anxiety is, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies you can use to deal with and to manage anxiety. Okay, first off, what is anxiety? Just so we're all on the same page. First off, it's a normal response, right? It's your body's response to stress or to fear. Um, it's feeling nervous or uneasy. It's an apprehension, and sometimes this can manifest into physical signs. So some of you might experience anxiety, and you might have some physical reactions to it. It's going to be different for everybody in terms of physically how you experience anxiety and how intense or frequent that is. Some of the common signs are going to be an increased heart rate. For some people, it's going to feel like you can feel your heart almost trying to beat out of your chest. You might have increased sweating, especially in your hands and in your palms. You might experience some tightening of muscles or dry mouth. And some of us can even actually get like a little bit shaky and have a hard time sort of stopping our hand from shaking, or you might notice your foot bouncing up and down frequently. Those are some normal physical signs of anxiety that a lot of us experience. Anxiety is pretty normal, though, like I said in the beginning. So if this is something you struggle with, no, you're not alone. In fact, 40 million Americans suffer from some sort of anxiety disorder. So that's something that's diagnosable, but the amount of us that experience anxiety is far more than that. But 40 million Americans suffer to the point where it can be a diagnosable condition. And worldwide, it affects 1 in 14 people. So there are a lot of people in the world that struggle with anxiety. But again, it's normal. It may not feel good, but it's something that we all experience at various times. And why do people become anxious? Well, there's this fear of not doing well in a situation, whether it be a social situation, a test, a big game. There's this fear of not doing well that's going to cause other people to think less of you, right? So people are afraid that they're going to be judged or that they're going to be laughed at. But keep in mind that the consequences of not doing well in most of these situations are considerably less severe than most people imagine. So the fear that we have, the thing that we think is going to happen, oftentimes that's a worst case scenario, and that's not actually what happens. So our mind is almost tricking us into believing these worst case scenarios, which is actually increasing our stress and anxiety as opposed to decreasing it, which we would like to do. So for example, like one bad grade on a math test doesn't mean you'll fail the class, but that can oftentimes be a fear, and that can create stress and anxiety. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is go ahead and pause this video, and you're going to want to open your orange book to page 23, and you're going to do an anxiety self-assessment and rate these different scenarios on a scale of 1 to 5, how anxious they make you feel. This is a good exercise for anything, really, because what this is going to do is it's going to help create self-awareness. It's going to force you to think about these situations and how much maybe they impact you and how much of an impact these situations have on your experience with anxiety. So go ahead and pause the video. And once you've completed that anxiety self-assessment, you can go ahead and resume the video. Okay, so some good news. Anxiety might not feel great, but it's totally manageable. It's totally treatable. Now, it might be more difficult for some of us than others. So some of us, it might take longer to learn how to effectively deal with anxiety, but no, there are solutions out there. I like this picture here that goes along with it. So how something ends up rarely depends on how much you worry about it. Yeah, so the level of worry you assign to something that doesn't really have an outcome over how it's going to turn out. Some other things that really create anxiety in these thought bubbles here, we tend to focus on things that are entirely out of our control, and that's going to create stress and anxiety, especially because we don't have any control over these things. So we'll just continue to worry about them, and we have no way to sort of change those things that are out of our control. Some of us maybe have bad experiences and memories that are going to create that. So maybe you have been judged or laughed at before. So you're more likely maybe to have that fear, and anxiety is going to be a more consistent issue for you. Or again, like I said before, you're imagining the worst case scenario, even though that's likely not going to happen. Okay, between pages 24 and 26, All of these coping strategies we're going to talk about are in your book, so you can always reference that, or you can reference this video again if you'd like. But anxiety reducing techniques, they can be used in different ways. So they can be proactive or reactive. And in fact, you should be using both, right? So before, during, and after, you should be using these techniques. The proactive approach, it's really a way first for you to practice these skills. Think about why do we practice anything? Well, anytime you learn a new skill, whether it be something in sports, band, chorus, class, at home, wherever it may be, odds are you're not going to be an expert at it right away, right? Odds are you're going to have some hiccups, you're going to mess up a little bit here and there. That's to be expected when you're learning anything new. Well, the same goes for these coping skills, right? If you've never used it before and you're really struggling with anxiety and you try to use that skill for the first time in that moment where the anxiety is really intense, odds are you're going to have a hard time doing it. So you want to practice these things, these coping skills, when you're not actually experiencing anxiety. That way when anxiety comes up, hopefully you can do it more successfully. Okay, deep breathing. Now this is just one example of deep breathing. There are hundreds of breathing exercises that exist that can be helpful for you, but this is one that's very popular and very common. So the first step is you're going to breathe in deeply for the count of 4. And then you're going to hold that breath for 4 seconds. And then you're going to breathe out for 4 seconds. You want to repeat this about 4 or 5 times. You can also do it 4, 5, 6. Some people do it that way where they breathe in for 4, hold for 5, and exhale for 6. Again, there's so much variability with these breathing exercises, but this is a good one to start with. And if you're looking for more, you can do your own independent research. If you Google breathing exercises or breathing techniques for anxiety, you're going to get a list of 100 different ways to do breathing exercises. But this is a standard one that you're going to see often and is effective. Another one, this is one that I really like, and this is one that I use for myself, and this is one that I often find I'm using in counseling sessions with students as they're struggling to regulate emotions, specifically anxiety. It's called progressive muscle relaxation. Really, step one is you just want to sit in a comfortable position. You want to have your back against the chair, and you want to have your feet flat on the ground. In terms of closing your eyes, that's all dependent on your comfort. So if that's not something you're comfortable doing, you don't have to. That doesn't matter. Whatever is more relaxing for you. And then you're really just going to follow the instructions of progressive muscle relaxation. Now, in order to access it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to do progressive muscle relaxation. So I'm not going to include it in this video. I do have a separate video that I'll try and share with all of you, which is me just reading progressive muscle relaxation. So it's a script that you can follow. You can follow along with the video and do the exercise. Again, this is something you can also pursue on your own. If you go on YouTube or Google, and if you just type in progressive muscle relaxation, you'll find, again, hundreds of videos where you can practice this technique. But I highly recommend you look into progressive muscle relaxation. It's very effective. Preparation is also another way to help reduce feelings of anxiety, right? So, if you're really anxious about a test or you're really anxious about a big game coming up, first off, anxiety and stress can be a way that your body's telling you need to do something. And oftentimes it's telling you need to prepare. So if you're feeling really stressed out or anxious about an upcoming test, that's sort of your body's way of telling you, like, okay, we need to take some steps to make sure that we are prepared. So the more you study, the more you practice, the more you prepare for these situations or these exams or whatever they may be, hopefully that'll have a positive impact on your anxiety and will reduce some of those feelings. You can also do this with social situations. It might seem silly at first, but if you know that you have to go and work with some people that you've never met before, you have to go meet somebody new, it's helpful to practice that situation and kind of think about what are you going to say and how are you going to say it. Again, it might seem silly, but think about it like this. Like, going back to what we said about new skills, anytime you're learning something new, it takes time and it takes practice in order to become an expert at that skill. Mental rehearsal, that's very similar to preparation. But again, this can help reduce feelings of anxiety, especially in response to challenging situations. So how this is a little bit different than preparation is there's a visual component to this as well. So you want to visualize yourself in these situations, and you want to visualize yourself doing well in these situations. Before you start this process, it might be helpful to do progressive muscle relaxation or some breathing exercises to help get you in a more relaxed state. But mentally, you want to visualize, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? How are you going to deal with certain things that might come up? And again, you want to do this over and over again until you have an increased confidence, and you're feeling more relaxed and less stressed about the upcoming situation. Again, at first this might seem silly, but when we break it down, practice helps with anything, right? Practice helps you get better at sports, helps you get better at band, chorus, school, anything new that you're trying to learn. So we don't often talk about this with social situations, but the mental rehearsal and the preparation can have such a positive impact on our experiences in those situations, and can put us in a more relaxed state when we're entering those situations. Positive thinking. This is really another way to help reduce feelings of anxiety. A lot of times when anxiety is going on, if we paid attention to our thoughts in those moments, they're often very negative, especially towards ourselves, right? And if we have this negative thought pattern, that's not going to reduce our stress. In fact, that's going to amplify it. That's going to increase our feelings of stress. Look, this is easier said than done. When I tell you, you really want to stop the negative thoughts and replace them with positive ones. Some of you might have an easier time doing that than others. For those of you who struggle with this, this is when it's okay to reach out for help. There's people that can help you sort of recognize these negative thought patterns that you have, and help you figure out, how do I replace that thinking? This image on the bottom really kind of depicts how we as humans behave. So oftentimes we have a situation, something happens, and before we have an emotional reaction to it, we actually have a thought. So how we process a situation, how we think about it, that actually is where our feeling comes from, right? So if we're having negative thoughts about how we'll do on a math test, for example, we'll just stick with that example, that's going to drastically decrease our confidence. It's going to make us feel bad about ourselves. So if we're able to replace that, and we're able to replace that negative thought with a more positive one, that's going to have a helpful impact on how we're feeling. So for example, here's a negative thought, and we're sticking with that school or math example again. So the negative thought is, I'm really worried about the test tomorrow. I know I'm going to get everything wrong. Well, if we're looking back at this, that thought is going to have a negative impact on how you're feeling, right? But if you're able to replace that, I'm worried about the test tomorrow. It's still okay to acknowledge that you're worried about the test and that you are a little stressed, but I've studied hard. Hopefully you've used that preparation and mental rehearsal strategy to help reduce feelings of stress, and I know I'll do well. Okay, so that's very confident. And even if things don't turn out as I'd like, which is still possible, right? We can have positive thoughts and positive self-talk, but it doesn't mean that we're always going to do well on everything. And even if things don't turn out as I like, it won't be the end of the world. Again, one poor grade on a math test doesn't mean you're going to fail the class. So one bad thing is not the end of the world. Again, this is easier said than done, but some of you might be able to do it. Others of you, again, this is when it's okay to reach out for help. Counselors, teachers, parents, whoever it may be, specifically counselors, they're really going to be trained, and they're going to be able to help you identify these negative thought patterns, what impact it's having on you, and they're going to help you start replacing those negative thoughts with more positive ones. Okay, lastly, what I want you to do is you're going to turn to page 27 in your workbook, and this is your action plan. So there's a bunch of situations from the anxiety self-assessment. So the ones that were most stressful for you, I want you to take those examples and write down how you can improve the way you cope in each of those situations. And look at it not just at home or at school. Think about what you as a human being. So you at home, you at school, you with your friends, you on the bus, or whatever situations you exist in. Think about it like that. Okay. We're going to talk about anger. We're not going to do it in this video. That's going to be a separate video. But I hope this was helpful with anxiety. Like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more coping strategies that exist. If you're finding that you're trying these strategies and they're just not working, again, this is when it might be helpful to reach out to somebody else who can help you sort of explore and learn new strategies that may work better for you. Okay. Thanks, everybody.